Are you ready?
Join on a corner where the big boys play.
Oh, I forgot to turn off the overlay. I always do that. What's going on, everybody? Good morning to everybody. Oh, so excited about today's episode. It's extra special for a number of reasons. Not only is it a topic I'm excited about, but also I get to bring on a very special guest today. But before we do that, definitely say hello to me in the comments. I love to know where everybody is hanging out from. Where are we watching, right? So I definitely want to make sure that I know where y'all are from. Good morning, James Hicks. Hello. I believe James is out in California speaking at a conference today. He's one of our favorite StreamYard users. And then what's up, G. Albert? We're only getting a 30-second prep. I know. We need like a little bit more of a warm-up, don't we? Almost need like a little bit more of that, like awesome. It's not enough. I need to I like it. I want to get pumped up. So we got the Tower Radio Show watching from Texas. Hey, Dean Reynolds. It's been a while. I haven't seen you around for a while. So obviously over in Atlanta. And we got Fort Worth, Texas in the house. My guest is from Texas. She's in the Houston area. So former fellow Texan there for you. Oh my gosh, we got Tucson in the house as well. Hello, we're from Austin. We live stream our podcast recording from Dallas Love Fields Lead with Love. That's awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, so we are going to be talking about podcasting today. So definitely let me know where y'all are watching from. We've got some watchers over on LinkedIn. We've got some watchers on Facebook. We are multi-streaming. We are all over the place. We are on the StreamYard Facebook channel. We're in the StreamYard Facebook community group. We're over on YouTube. We're on LinkedIn. We're like all over the place. So, oh my gosh, look at this. You guys are awesome. Look at this. We got Chesapeake, Virginia in the house. Dallas, we got more Texans, right? We got more Texans. And then we got Anan from Malaysia. Welcome. My friends, we are going to talk about a very exciting topic today. But before we get started, my name is Melanie Dyann Howe. I am one of your live streaming mentors, and I love StreamYard. And so we're going to be talking about live video and podcasting today. This is actually something I love to talk about. I always have this phrase where I say live video and podcasting go together kind of like peanut butter and jelly, like literally. I mean, I'm kind of a fan. And if you're a fan of a really quirky way to eat peanut butter sandwiches, maybe eat peanut butter and pickles. Okay, I got a good friend who got me hooked on peanut butter and pickle sandwiches. I know it sounds really weird and actually gross, but it's also amazing. It's delicious. So however you want to look at that, there you go. We got Brazil, we got Seattle, we got Thailand, we got more Texas, right? We got Chesapeake, Virginia again. Oh, this is going to be fantastic. All right. Hi from Cape Town. My podcast is the Write the Book Inside You, but I don't live stream it because I edit it. Okay, Carol. Well, maybe today we'll give you some different ways to think about it. You don't always have to live stream your podcast, but we're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff today. So, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have some fun today. I want you guys to do me a favor, right? Do me a favor. If this is your first time watching the Ask StreamYard show, let me give you just a couple of, ground rules, if you will. We're going to answer a question that is being featured from one of our community members, right? And so if you want to be featured and you have a question and you want to ask and maybe be featured on this show, all you have to do is use the hashtag #AskStreamYard. Post it on Twitter, post it in the Facebook group. We have a Facebook community that you can join. It's an open community for anyone live streaming or using StreamYard. And use that hashtag, and that tells us, hey, I'd like you to feature my question, Mel. And so we might pick it. Now, here's how we pick questions for the show. We pick questions that we can take a deep dive on, right? So not really like, if it's only going to take me like 5 seconds or 30 seconds to answer your question and there's really nothing else to cover, I'm probably not going to pick it. I like to pick questions that they're about content strategy and like maybe like different methods, and there's different layers to it. So whatever those burning questions you have, use that hashtag, and we like to review those and then we pick them for the show. And if you get featured, if we select your question, we're going to send you a t-shirt as well. And in fact, my guest is wearing that t-shirt today, so you get to see it in action. So if you've got one of those questions, definitely post that in the group. Now, if you have a feature request, hold on to those, because I'm not going to be able to entertain those today. So if you have a feature request that's not related to today's topic at all, I want you to actually email contact@StreamYard.com and let them know what your feature request is. You can also go to StreamYard.com/contact, and there's actually a form you can fill out there. And Gage and Dan and the development team, they love getting those feature requests, even if it's something you maybe think somebody has asked for before. They like to understand what the users want. So please don't use this stream as a way to provide feature requests to me. I won't be able to entertain those, but we can definitely talk about today's topic. So let's get started by, let me tell you what today's topic is. And then I'm going to bring on my guest who's going to help me with this topic because, as I always say, it's a juicy one. So today's question was submitted by Joseph Hedrick. He said, is it possible to simultaneously do a live stream and stream to a podcast? So again, this is such a great question and a great topic, but I would really like to know from everyone here today, do you have a podcast? So anyone here that maybe has a podcast, I would actually like to know if you do. So let me know in the comments that you do have a podcast, and I would love to know that. So, hey, so here we go. Here's a perfect example of something that we aren't going to cover today, right? I'm not talking about Instagram and StreamYard today, but you can definitely post that question in the group and we will cover it with office hours. But we are definitely going to be talking about podcasting and live streaming today. So I want to know if you have a podcast and if you're using live video with it. And while you guys are doing that in the comments, I'm going to bring up my very special guest and my dear friend, Miss Crystal Prophet.
Hey. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I wanted to show, I got my StreamYard shirt on today. So, yeah, and Melanie and I were dealing with some technical difficulties with my mic beforehand. And I was like, I basically look like a game show host at this point because my boom arm mic was having issues. But it's real life. And I just wanted to share with you, like, you kind of just have to do the thing sometimes and figure it out. And I mean, Mel says this all the time, like, it's scrappy, not crappy, right?
Totally.
So here we are. I look like a game show host and I'm ready for your questions.
I mean, you might be starting a new trend, right? It's kind of like vintage-ish, like holding that microphone. I mean, you could walk around the room if you want.
Right? Like the Bob Barker, like skinny one, like the actual retail price is,
I love it.
I'm just kidding.
I think it's hilarious because it totally fits the fact that you are a podcaster and you are a podcasting coach and you teach people how to launch their podcast. So naturally you're going to have a couple of backup options. So what was happening, just so everybody knows, Crystal changed computers. She's getting some feedback from her main podcasting mic that she also uses in her live videos. And it was like, what in the world? And so she's doing this process of elimination and she busted out the old mic, the other XLR, but it's handheld and she doesn't have a tripod. She's like, I'm just going to roll with it. I don't care. So there you go. So here we are. So sometimes that's what you got to do. It's what you got to do. So Crystal, I would love for you to let our audience know before we dive into getting into today's topic, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the community because this is your first appearance in a StreamYard show. So first of all, thank you for being here. I'm very much excited that you're going to help answer this question because you are like my podcasting queen. You're my go-to when it comes to podcasting stuff. But do me a favor and just introduce yourself. Let the audience know a little bit about you.
Yeah. So first of all, shout out to all the Texas peeps. I saw so many people from Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin. I live just outside of the Houston, Texas area, but I'm so excited that we have a lot of international people here. Like this is really fun because podcasting has grown so much since I started, and I help entrepreneurs start, launch, and market their podcasts. This is my jam. It's my bread and butter is to help people get their shows launched and out into the world because I believe that everybody has a special message to share. And I'm really excited to talk about live streaming and podcasting because video podcasts have just been on the rise ever since platforms like StreamYard. Yes, I'm a StreamYard user. I think Melanie first introduced me to StreamYard at least a year and a half ago, and I've been using it ever since to do my live streams as well as podcast interviews and show behind the scenes of what I do on my podcast. So I'm excited to chat all things video podcasting, and so just let me know what questions y'all have. So yeah,
this is going to be fantastic. And I will let everybody know, Crystal is a trooper today. She's a total trooper. She is literally like She was on her deathbed like yesterday, and she's still She's got this cold thing brewing up, and it's like, I know, Crystal, that you're like, I'm saving my voice. I'm saving my voice.
Tea. I got my StreamYard mug with my hot tea in it. I'm ready.
Yes, your chalice, right?
My bowl.
So
it's not coffee. I would normally be like a bowl of coffee. This is it's hot tea.
Oh, there you go. Helping with the soothing of the throat. So, and I know I've got a little bit of we both have a little bit going on, but you are definitely in worse shape than I am. So thank you for being here. I know that you are fighting through that cold. So hopefully if you have to mute your mic and take a cough or whatever, you know how to do it. You got it. So we're here for it. I know that our StreamYard viewers are actually super awesome and great. So we're going to be having some fun. So you got some Fort Worth in the house, by the way, right? You got some Fort Worth in the house. All right, this is an interesting, somebody had said, I have 2 dynamic handled mics that I use when doing remote, great for sound rejection, that's why you have that mic. Actually, you use it for your remote. Yeah, so that's awesome.
I have a Tascam. It's a portable recorder, so I can plug my XLR microphones directly into the box. I take these when I travel because I'm that person that podcasts like on the road. I've podcasted everywhere. Like I've recorded just random places. I've also just recorded directly on my phone. So yeah, but the handheld dynamic microphones are fantastic for doing any kind of remote recording for sure. Or if your other microphone cable like craps out on you and you need one in a pinch,
your backup.
Here we
yes,
go.
Your backup. Honestly, I'm using an XLR microphone as well, and I still always have my awesome Elgato Wave 3 plugged in because you never know. I always say, don't get rid of all your equipment when you upgrade. Definitely hang on to at least a spare, but also for mobility even. So yeah, so very good. So this is awesome. One of our group members said, I co-host Moving America podcast. Our latest episode was our first using StreamYard. It simplified our remote audio and video recording. Wish we'd found it sooner. Super exciting. So, okay, Crystal, let's definitely dive into our awesome topic today. So I want to pull that back up because this is what we're going to be talking about today. So again, Joseph had asked the question, is it possible to simultaneously do a live stream and stream to a podcast? Now, I like to be very, very specific. Joseph's question is saying stream to a podcast. But so there could be a couple of, understandings of Joseph's question. So what I did want to talk about today is I wanted to make sure that we understood there is a difference between live streaming a podcast recording and what this phrase, at least how I'm interpreting this phrase of streaming to a podcast. And so I definitely think that we need to talk about that today. As far as I understand, there are no live podcast platforms as of right now. Is that correct, Crystal?
Right. There's a lot of people that are coming on the scene saying that that's what it is, but it's no different in my interpretation of what a live podcast is, other than us doing a live stream here. There are some really cool ones, like people like Fireside. This is Mark Cuban's app that they released recently. And then Listen app is another really cool platform that they're trying to make this a thing. But as of right now, there isn't something that is like the definitive, like, hey, I'm going to go listen to this live podcast on this platform. I think that, and we can talk about this in a second, but when it comes to podcasting versus live stream, I think that they absolutely complement each other, but I wouldn't say that they're the exact same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does, actually. Okay. Yeah. I definitely think that it's interesting how live audio is starting to kind of have this and I don't know, okay, so Clubhouse was an app that came out last year in the midst of the pandemic. The Clubhouse came out and it was, for iOS only because it was in beta. Now it's available to Android users as well. And it took off really fast. It blew up. Now, granted, there's still so many people that are like, I've never heard of it. Clubhouse was essentially this audio only chat room, right? I was comparing it to the old days of AOL chat rooms or AOL Instant Messenger. And it was you're in a chat room and you're typing, but these were chat rooms, but it's all audio. Right. And you have a stage where people can talk to each other. And then you have everybody else that's just listening in the audience. And that blew up really fast. And I think that was one of the earlier sort of, popular live audio experiences that was going on. And then soon after, Facebook announced that they were working on their version of this. Twitter Spaces has since come out, which is essentially a very similar thing. And then when Facebook audio, I don't know if anybody has been noticing this, but in your Facebook mobile app, it does not do anything. It does not show up on desktop. But if you're in Facebook, every once in a while, you'll see at the top of your Facebook, it'll say something like, Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, they've been using him. He's been creating these audio rooms. Right. And it's like, so they're in beta, and they've announced that they're in beta on it. But that's different than a live podcast. It's a different kind of thing. So a podcast is traditionally an audio file that's recorded. It's uploaded to a host, a hosting server, and then it uses an RSS feed to then deliver that podcast out to the different directories, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, right? Google's,
Right.
there's so many of them now. I don't even know all of them. And most people just say, you can check out my podcast wherever you want to listen to a
Right.
podcast, so.
Yeah. And
yeah.
when it comes to like those first like live audio applications, it was very clear in the terms that you cannot record it. That was like a really big thing because people are like, well, how am I repurposing this content? I can't record because you can't do like a screen recording. Y'all don't tell anybody. Okay. Don't tell anybody I did this. I was in a Clubhouse room and I was talking to like a really famous celebrity and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do a screen recording of what, and it like shut down. I was like, oh no, DEFCON like 10, like there's going to be someone come knock on my door because it was like, you cannot do this on this app. And I was like, oh my God, because I didn't even think about it. I was in the moment. I was so excited to be talking to this person. And then I was like, oh my God, you can't do this. It's against their terms of service. So to that regard, most of these were just live, spur of the moment, spontaneous experience. Or if they were planned, that's awesome too. But there was a lot of people who were just hopping into Clubhouse and like listening to just different conversations. But then that was it. It was not recorded. You couldn't, you had to just like be there. Like my husband and I were really big fans of like live comedy shows. And there's just something about like being there, like being live and being able to have that experience. Whereas with a podcast, and I use that in quotes because I believe that a podcast is something that's recorded and then you can listen to it asynchronously. Did I say that right? I shouldn't use big words. I don't know. I shouldn't use big words, but you know what I mean? Like you could listen to it whenever you want. You could go back and listen to it 50 times. So that's the difference of what I define as a podcast versus a live audio room or a live audio experience. And I think that people are trying to make strides to change that. Like I know I've listened to Gary V's audio rooms on Facebook, and you can go back and listen to those, and you can actually watch. I say watch. You're just like kind of watching people like peeing up and down in the
app.
room.
Yeah.
There's nothing like really to watch, but you can see how long the audio room lasted. So that is recorded in a Facebook room, but it's just interesting. I mean, honestly, when it comes to predicting like what's going to happen, it's so new, y'all. It is so new that I don't know. I can't say definitively that this is going to be the one application that's going to win out because I feel like it's just a Wild West. Like everybody's battling for the best way that people will listen to it, the best way people will consume it, how people can repurpose it, like all the things. But as of right now, I still don't know that there is like one definitive player since so many people came in and kind of, I don't want to say copied, duplicated, were inspired by what
Recycled.
Clubhouse did. There we go. There
Yeah.
we go.
I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think that it's audio. It's crazy because podcasting has been around for a long time.
Right.
Back when we had Apple Pod, like the pod, what was it called? Oh my God. iPod. Yes, the iPod. Thank you. God. Yeah, the iPods before we had iPhones.
Right.
The iPod had an app on it that was Apple Podcasts, and that was where podcasts started. And, people kind of have, podcasts, it has just blown up. And I do think that there's a difference between, the way people like to consume content. I do think there's something about listening to something, not seeing something, and just it's all audio. It has a difference in how you consume that information. And that is why I think podcasting has not gone away and has actually grown. Plus, just like live video with companies like StreamYard coming out with these super easy, like, I mean, these platforms that are just like anyone can learn to use them to create professional media. And that's, I think, the other thing that's happened with podcasting is that, you know, it's just becoming easier to do. It's becoming, the microphones are cheaper, you know, the equipment is simpler, the platforms are simpler. It's easier, quite frankly, to go create and launch a podcast. But there is a difference when it comes to how you're going to approach live video and podcasting. And so really going back to, so if you're just not joining us, everybody, we are answering Joseph's question where he wanted to know, can you simultaneously do a live stream and stream to a podcast? And so the true answer to that is no, because you cannot stream to a podcast right now. The podcast world, as Crystal, you know, defined it is audio that is recorded, it is uploaded, and it can be played and paused and replayed and downloaded and whatever. A streamed audio experience right now in the podcast world, by definition, does not exist. There are apps, you know, there's people talking about developing ways to do it. So with that, I wanted to say technically no. The answer to the question is no, because that ability doesn't exist. But what we wanted to talk about today further is we wanted to talk about using live videos and podcasting, because you can do a live, you can essentially do a live recording. You can do a recording of a podcast video, but it can be a live stream. So you can live stream a podcast recording, which you then are going to download or export, maybe do some editing, and then upload it to your podcasting host. So there is a difference. And so while we can't do a live podcast stream, so to say, gosh, I'm really using this. I'm really using my quotes today. Okay, my quoties, man. Yeah. My quoties today. I feel uncomfortable, like, because I'm like, by definition, okay. Because here's the thing: it's all based on interpretation. I think that someone could sit there and say that, you know, the whole audio room experience is like a podcast. I mean, you can approach it like one. But it's not a podcast, right? So that's why I'm saying, like, by definition, right? So. Right. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today. So, by the way, if you guys have questions for us, definitely feel free to post those questions. Put a Q in front of your question. That'll help me find it as a question. Any type of feature requests, let's hold off on those. And any support requests that are not related to today's topic, let's hold off on those as well. You can always email support@StreamYard.com for any support issues or any issues that you're having. And then, of course, feature requests, you can always email, you know, contact@StreamYard.com for sure. So Christian is here, by the way, our wonderful content director over at StreamYard. He says, we live stream out podcast recordings using StreamYard. It's great to help us reach audiences across multiple destinations where they want to tune in from. Yes, totally agree. So Crystal, this is a perfect segue into the next kind of what I wanted to talk about. And these are ways that people who are, you know, maybe somebody's starting out, they have a podcast, but they're not really using live video with their podcast. Or vice versa, somebody is live streaming and they just have that thought in their mind, like, okay, taking on a podcast is a whole nother thing. We've got a number of things we can cover here, but this is a perfect segue into talking about how you can use live video and podcasting together. So let me check on real fast. I'm going to check on our comments, make sure I haven't missed a question that is related for this. Carol says, my podcast is video for YouTube. Plus, the audio is stripped out for Apple and audio apps, but I spend time editing the video with B-roll, then send it to an audio expert. Okay, so so there's a lot of post-production that Carol's talking about here that she's doing, which is totally fine. There's a number of ways you can do that and in doing those things for sure. So, sorry. Mike from Never Let the Machines Win said, the first time I heard about Clubhouse was when a Twitch streamer was rebroadcasting the Clubhouse feed and commenting over it. Yeah. Yeah. I think you can do that now as long as you say in your live audio room that you are recording, repurposing, whatever. I think you can do that now. So, okay, let me see here. First, let's talk about some ways that we can use live streaming and podcasting together. So as I mentioned earlier, you can I think that one of the most popular ways that people like to do this is when they have guests. And we have a number of people commenting in the comments that from a guest standpoint. And that is, you can do an interview using live video and you can use that audio for a podcast. And I think that the reason why the guest thing comes up so often is because I think people feel like, okay, well, I really want to do a live video with you, but then they also want to use it for their podcast, but they don't want to ask that person to do two separate, appearances. Right. And so that's why I think that they approach that's why the guest thing seems to be very popular, where people want to know how to do this. So, Crystal, I know that you have a number of times done a live recording, is what we'll call it, right? A live broadcasted, a live video that is a recording of a podcast episode. So you have two podcasts.
Yes.
You have the Profit Podcast, and then you have the Potty Report, which is your daily short form podcast that's about kind of being a podcaster, if you will. I don't know. I mean, is that a good way to describe it?
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I know that you've many times you've gone on live video inside your community, and you've been like, hey, today I'm batch recording my daily episodes. Can you just talk about that experience a little bit, how you approach it, and why you like doing that?
Yeah, for sure. So I can think of 3 ways that I have used StreamYard, as well as like I've used StreamYard to create my podcast. And then there's one way that I think is really cool that I'm going to end with, that I haven't done it, but I'm like, I'm going to try this out. So I'm like, I love to practice what I preach. And this is one thing that I've been thinking about doing as I start doing a lot more podcast interviews. So the first one is, like Melanie said, she's the one that actually gave me this idea. So I got to give her all the credit. But she was like, you're recording, because I batch record my episodes for my daily podcast. It's Monday through Friday, and it's 5 minutes or less. So I can record like 5 days for 5 minutes. That's 25 minutes, right? It's not a ton of recording, but I do like the idea of sharing behind the scenes. It's what my audience loves. They love when I share with them the ups, the downs, like the roller coaster of podcasting. And so what I'll do is, when I record, I will share my screen. So just like, if we were recording right now, if I was going live on my YouTube channel, on my Facebook group, wherever you wanted to stream, I would share my screen of the actual application that I use to record my podcast. So it allows for me to record my show, and then I actually have an extra backup, because StreamYard's recording in the background. So I could record on my application, and then people can see like, oh, this is where she messed up. This is what she does whenever she makes a mistake. I could take them through the entire editing process of like, oh, okay, this is how I add in my music, or I do any of the other back end things that I do for my podcast. But I know there's people watching that are like, I don't teach podcasting. My audience wouldn't be interested in seeing just the wavy lines whenever I'm recording my show. Maybe that would be boring to them. Well, what you could do is you could share other types of behind the scenes when you're recording your podcast. Now, I'm talking about solo episodes. We'll get to interviews in a second. But if you're recording something, maybe you have a Google Doc open, or maybe like, I'm a huge fan, y'all. I have so many. I have one right here in front of me. I'm a huge fan of these just like little notebooks, and I will have my notes in there. So maybe I will tell them like, hey, I'm reading my notes while I'm recording this. I could ask people, do you have questions? And I could answer them on the live recording, on the live stream, and then it would actually be in the podcast episode as well. So I could give people shout outs, and people love a good shout out, right? Like Melanie's putting up comments right now, like you're getting a little shout out while we're here live. So I think that that's a cool way to engage with your audience while you're recording. Now, let's talk about interviews, because something that I have done is I have a private Facebook group that people can join if they're interested in learning about podcasting. And what I could do is have an interview with a special guest that's going to be aired at a later time on my podcast. And then only the group members inside my Facebook group would be able to ask questions. So it's a perk of being part of that community. And then everyone later would be able to hear the recording. And then I could tell people like, hey, if you want to see more behind the scenes, or you want to be there live whenever we record our next interview, come join our Facebook group. So it kind of creates that sense of community, and people can get to see behind the scenes. But what I wanted to tell you about, and the idea that I have that I think would be really cool to incorporate other features of StreamYard, is you could stream an interview directly into a Facebook group, And then you could also simultaneously stream it as an unlisted YouTube video. Now, hang on, because I'm going to get like more complex, like just for a second, because this isn't for the brand new podcaster or the brand new streamer. Like, this is a more advanced approach. But what you could do is you could stream as an unlisted YouTube video, kind of save that and share it later. You could share it, like I know Melanie, and you can correct me on this if I have the feature wrong in my head, but you could actually use that as a live stream for in the future if you wanted to, or you could just air it at a later date for other people in your audience. So again, you're giving that behind the scenes for the people in your private community, but you can also share it to your YouTube channel in the future, or you could download it and repurpose it. We could talk about repurposing later too, or if you have any questions about repurposing, put a Q in the comments and let us know. But does that help? Like, does that answer some questions about live streaming and podcasting? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you. Come back.
Dang it, I muted myself because I was clearing my throat. By the way, if you need to take a sip or anything, because I know you're fighting that cold, you just let me know. So I think that definitely you can. What you're describing is doing, approaching it and live streaming it, but multi-streaming it to a private destination. So inside of when you stream to YouTube, if you are on the basic plan or the professional plan, then you have the ability to multi-stream. And so you can connect your YouTube channel. And when you stream to YouTube, which I don't think a lot of people realize this, is that you can stream it to YouTube as an unlisted or even a private video, which means unlisted essentially means that somebody has to have the link to be able to access the video. Private means nobody can access it at all. It is like behind the curtain, nobody. So the unlisted thing is also another way. What Crystal was describing was she's streaming it into her community. They're getting a sneak peek. They're getting a behind the scenes look. They are getting first access to that content, right? If they want to, they can watch the video version of the podcast recording. So what she's describing though is maybe you do that, but you go ahead and push it out to YouTube as unlisted. And then let's say your podcast, you export your audio, which I'll show you how to do that in a second, and you make it into its podcast and you push it out to the podcast directories. And then the day that it goes live in the podcast directories might be the day that you unlock the YouTube version. Right? Now, this is all going to depend on your social media strategy that you're using right now. And I definitely think that you have to understand reasons why you would gate access to something and why you would not gate it. But you're right. So if you stream it as unlisted, when you make it available, it will publish out. It will actually push out to your community. And if they have the notifications turned on, it will actually notify them that there's a new video from your YouTube channel. So for sure, definitely an interesting concept. So we definitely have a couple questions here as well. But before we go too much further, if you're joining us, we're talking about podcasting and live streaming together. The question that was submitted was basically, about can you do a live video and simultaneously stream a podcast? Well, you can't stream a podcast because there's no live podcast right now. There are live audio rooms inside some of the social media platforms, but that is a different type of thing. You could. So Christian had a question. Christian has lots of questions today. It looks like I know he's a podcaster as well, and so obviously this is a topic he's kind of like. I guarantee he's got his notebook out right now. So one of the questions he had, I'm gonna get up here and find it for a second. He mentioned he wanted to know, first he says, is live streaming a podcast also called podcasting? What is your take on that?
So I mean, honestly, okay, I'm going to tell you my take on it. This is coming from someone who teaches podcasting. I'm obsessed with podcasting. You can ask Melanie. It's literally what I eat, sleep, breathe, all the things. But I still believe that you can make up your own definition of what a podcast is. And I'm going to give Gary Vee as a perfect example. He has used live streams as podcast. He has used previous keynote speeches as podcast. He's used questions that he asks people on the sidewalk or question that he gets asked. Like, there's really no definitive, like, this can only be, I'm using the big aggressive quotes like Melanie, the only like podcast. Like, I believe that you can create your own rules when it comes to your show. But at the end of the day, the thing that's most important and what I would consider the thing that will define your podcast is consistency. So when you decide Are you going to put up an audio file? It doesn't matter if it's the same type of file every single time, if that's what you're creating for your show. But it does matter if it's consistent. Are you doing it every Wednesday where you put up a random file? That's fine. I would still consider that a podcast. But if you're throwing things out, like, it's Wednesday and I feel like throwing one out, and then maybe on Sunday, but then I'm going to take like 4 weeks off and then come back and put something up on Saturday. Like, that's too all over the place. Then it's not going to allow you to grow and scale your show, because people are like, I don't know when they're going to show up again. So I don't know when to be there. So it's just like, what StreamYard talks about, like the consistency of live streaming, like have that same cadence for your podcast, whether it's, Melanie and I do a live stream right now and turn this into a podcast episode, but it's not going to be for like 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months. Like, there's no rule on you have to wait this long before you can put something out there. But yeah, so that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I like it. I'm gonna be more on the tangible side. I say no. I think if you're live streaming a podcast, then you are live streaming. You are podcasting. You are creating a podcast, but podcasting.
But first and foremost,
I mean, yeah, you're doing both, but the video piece is live video. It's live streaming, and I do think that you're live streaming a podcast recording, but podcasting, to your point, is. The podcast itself includes show notes. The podcast itself includes probably an intro, an outro. There might be some post, editing that's different from your live video. So I do think podcasting is the act of, like you said, you have a regular show, and there's that process of it's a recorded file, goes into the directories, gets pushed out. The audience you don't know who your audience is. You can't see who's listening to your podcast. Very different from the experience of live video. So I do think that while you're, you happen to be recording a podcast via live video, I don't think I would call it podcasting. I would say today we're live streaming a podcast recording. I wouldn't say I'm podcasting right now, because you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I look at it. You know what I mean? Okay. So Christian's got another question that's kind of related to what we were just talking about before we got into that one. And he's saying, are there any benefits to live stream a podcast, but also broadcast to Twitter Spaces and send to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc.? So let me break this down for everybody. What Christian is referring to is, hey, open up StreamYard. We're going to do a live interview, okay? Secondarily, I'm going to grab my phone and I'm going to open up Twitter Spaces on my phone, okay? And I'm going to go to Twitter Spaces. I'm going to say, I'm talking to my friend Crystal Prophet today about live streaming and podcasting. I'm doing a live video, but I'm also on Twitter Spaces at the same time. He's talking about doing that at the same time, and then taking that audio file when you're done, and then downloading it and then uploading it into the directories. So there's a lot going on there, but I wanted to break that down, for what that means. Do you see benefits to doing something like that?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that is something that is a more complex strategy, and I would not recommend that for beginners. I am just a firm believer that you should really feel comfortable doing one thing, at least for a few weeks, if not like 3 months, and then start slowly building out where you're showing up live. The only caveat to that is StreamYard, because you can literally go live in all the places that, you've registered for. So I think that makes it a lot easier. But whenever you add in, because I used to try to do something similar with going live on StreamYard and then try to also do IG live at the same time, and then thinking to myself, well, I'll also just record this as a podcast. I'm not technical enough. Okay. I'm just going to be really honest. Like, I like to keep things really simple and to remember, like, oh, I got to make sure that I have the right microphone, or I got to get a better microphone for my phone, because it's just not going to sound as good as the one that I'm using my podcast microphone, but I can't connect my podcast. So there's just there's nuances to it. Is it doable? Absolutely. Are there benefits? I think that there can be, for the right person who is technically able to do that without the overwhelm. Because I know some people will, with the right intention, they're like, oh, I can do all that. But then you forget. you forget to go live on Instagram and you're like, oh crap, I was supposed to do that. Or you forget to have it recording in the background, or you forget to do whatever, which Melanie's going to talk about how you can actually just download the audio from StreamYard, which I learned something new today that I really want her to tell all of y'all, because I didn't know that StreamYard had this feature. But I think that there are benefits, but I wouldn't recommend it for somebody just getting started, for sure.
Yeah, I actually was so glad you said it that way, because I was going to say the same thing. So I do think that what Christian's describing he's saying, are there benefits? I think there could be benefits. It depends on what your goals are. It depends on where you're wanting to grow your audience, and depends on where you're wanting to grow your online presence. So for example, Clubhouse really didn't have a deep strategy unless you were active on Instagram or Twitter, because there was no way for someone to stay in touch with you. So, you talk, you're in an audio room and maybe get brought up on stage and you say something epic and there's hundreds of people in the audience listening to your epic thing. Well, then what? Like, what's the follow through? They're going to go look at your profile and they have no way to really, you can put your email in there, but people aren't going to do anything that's hard. But you could have a link to your Instagram and you could have a link to your Twitter. I think it was your Twitter, maybe just your Instagram. I forget. I don't know. It's been a while. I already ditched that thing. So anyway, so if they go to your Instagram and you're not active on Instagram, well then there is no benefit really to spending time. Again, you have to be prioritizing where you're spending your time, where you're putting yourself out there. And I do think that you could try to be in all the places, but can you really successfully manage that? Do you have a team that can help you manage that? Again, I think in order for this strategy to have benefits, then you have to have a strategy. And that's really what it boils down to. And as you said, you have to be systematically set up for it, which means you might have to have some extra tech, some extra complexities. And if you're just getting started, I say, no, there are no benefits to this. It's going to actually cause more noise for you. And you're probably going to get frustrated and maybe just, abandon ship. So I definitely think it kind of depends, but it's a good thing to think about. It's a good thing. Again, always have a strategy, always have an end game. For example, why am I on Twitter Spaces? What am I trying to accomplish here? And have that objective in mind, and then you can easily answer those questions. Somebody had a comment that I wanted to bring up about, where did it go? I just had it. It was a really good one about...
I saw another good one from Christian that I want to talk about is the comments. Like when you're live, like it's still a way to do it without being awkward.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk about that one in a second.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, we definitely are. I think that's definitely one of the things you have to consider too. So, okay, do me a favor. Okay, hold on. I had it. I literally had it. I lost my place in the comments. Now I'm looking for it. It started with a B. There it is. The person started with a B. I'm almost positive. Okay, I lost it. Okay, so yes. All right, here we go. So I want to show everybody something really quick though, because you mentioned it and I want to make sure everybody knows how easy this is. So the whole concept of live streaming with a guest, having, repurposing that audio, right? So that you can then go put it into a podcast episode. If you're on StreamYard's basic plan or professional plan, then you have access to your past recordings, including the audio recording. And so you can actually download the video, but you can just download the audio only. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you guys. So here, really quick, I've got a short video to show you guys actually how to do that. It is very simple, but I don't think everybody quite realizes how, because they've never clicked on all the buttons. So here is how you do that. Oops, let me take this banner down so it's not confusing. There we go. All right. So this is obviously the StreamYard dashboard, right? And so you go to your past broadcasts, and then out to the right, you're going to have those three dots. And you're going to see the option to download recording, and you're going to have video, but then you're also going to have audio. And so literally all you do is click the audio, and it's actually going to download an MP3 file for you that you can then use. You can edit it. You can do whatever you want with it. But the MP3 file, like, it's that simple. So I know people talk about this all the time. They'll say, oh, I do the video and then I got to go strip out the audio. I got to use this other tool. I got to strip it out. And I know you've done that before, but literally if you are on the basic or the professional plan for StreamYard, it's there for you. It saves it. You don't have to remember to press record somewhere on some other device. You don't have to strip anything out. It literally will download it. And depending on the length of your video,
I got something to say. I have something to say because you do not understand. For anybody that's brand new to StreamYard or you've been using it for a while, you don't understand how big of a deal this is.
Yes.
Because I used to do Facebook Lives, and I would have to go back and grab that audio. Like there's a YouTube video I did all about it several years ago, and it was like 17 steps. And then I started using StreamYard, and it was like, oh, you just click a button, and there's your audio. And I'm like, you don't have to convert it. You don't have to do all these other steps that I had to do. So like, I feel so old saying this. I'm like, remember back in the day, like all those things. Like, but seriously, having this capability to have quality audio, because you'll have other platforms that record video and do all the things, but to actually have it be quality audio from your live stream is I just want everybody to know, like, I just feel like that person that's like the old timer that's like, you should all be grateful for how well you have it. But it's so true. It's so true. So I love this feature, and I think that it's fantastic. So going back to, the questions earlier about live streaming versus podcasting, if you're going to live stream and use that as a podcast, like StreamYard does make this so easy. It's just so much easier than it used to be. And if you're already live streaming on a regular basis and you're like, I've really been thinking about starting a podcast, it's a fantastic option to just start repurposing your live streams. And that's what you do to get started. And who knows, maybe you want to adopt a future format where you have solo episodes or interviews or something else. But I think that it's a fantastic place to get started. Plus, I just want everybody to have a podcast anyway. So
I know you do. I know you do. I know. And anyone could have a podcast, whether it be for their professional life or their personal life, honestly. Yeah. Okay, I found that question I wanted to answer. So Bernard said, how does your audience engage in a private stream that's only recording? So here's the deal, Bernard, if it is a private stream in a private location where your audience can't access it, then they won't be able to engage with you, right? Now, you that's why, again, going back to the strategy of, if you're going to do a live video recording for a podcast, Crystal, you mentioned doing it in a private community that's a little bit, less accessible to the world, if you will. Right. Again, that goes back to your strategy. I think I think it's kind of a cool idea that you shared about, let's say you have a Facebook page, a Facebook community, you have a YouTube channel, you have an email list, you're on Instagram, right? I'm a big proponent of, if you have a Facebook community, there needs to be an exclusive reason why people should be in that community. So if you're doing everything in that community is the exact same as everything else outside, what's the benefit of them joining your community, right? And so one of the things that I think that makes those community members feel special, now this could be for a free community, but if you have a paid community, you better be offering something exclusive because they're paying you money, right? So anyway, one of those benefits would be if you have a podcast, right? And let's say you have guest experts all the time. If you stream the podcast recording to that community, they're getting it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the rest of the world is getting it. That's going to make them feel special. The other thing that I think is really cool, and I know, Crystal, you did this with your potty report, is you would, before you start actually saying, okay, before I hit record for my podcast, you would actually ask your audience in the community, what questions do you have about this specific topic? And then you would use that question in the actual recording of the podcast. So you're not only giving them early access to content, you're also giving them an ability to ask a question, and you are literally highlighting their question and asking them that question. And so now those members inside that private area need to, back to your idea of consistency, I think the more consistent you are with this type of strategy, the more they're going to feel connected to it, the more they're going to tune into it. And also, you could also use that as creating FOMO. So you're out on the podcast, okay? And this goes into some best practices. When you actually create a podcast, if it's a repurposed live stream that you did, you might want to mention that as you do the podcast. You might want to say, hey, this was a live stream I did inside my community. I interviewed so-and-so, and, we had this great conversation about XYZ. So I hope you enjoy it. And then it goes to that live streamed audio. Those people are like, wait a minute, I want to be in that community. I would have liked to have watched that interview. You're maybe driving traffic into your Facebook community. So one of the benefits to using live video and podcasting together like this is you're driving traffic to both places. And so I really love it that way. But let's touch on repurposing before we take more questions.
Well, hang on one second. I want to make like one small comment because I know some people are like, I don't have a Facebook community. I don't want to create a Facebook group. You could do the same thing with having the video unlisted on YouTube and then sending that link to only your email list and saying, hey, I'm going to be live. Like it's going to be at this specific place and time on YouTube. No one else will have access to this. But here's where you go at this day, this time, because then you will be able to engage with them and answer comments still, because I know that this is the question, like, well, how do I actually engage with them? Because if you were to just embed your live stream on your website, you may not have that capability to answer questions as you would if you were live on YouTube. So I just want to like wrap that up, of how you would engage with your audience. You could do it in a private group or you could do it as an unlisted video on YouTube. So yeah.
Yeah. And there is a new community membership feature with YouTube as well. Well, newer, I suppose. I'm going to use this as a quick opportunity because I think you're awesome. But this person is asking, where's the best podcast? Can I start to do a podcast? Well, I think you're asking, where can you learn how to create a podcast? I'm going to say you should go tune into Crystal's podcast, The Profit Podcast. Crystal Profit, the Profit Podcast. It's called The Profit Podcast, right?
Yes. Yeah.
God, sorry.
2 F's and 2 T's. That's
2
how
F's
you
and 2
spell my
T's.
last name.
Make sure you spell it right. Yeah.
Well, I have a video podcast episode that for everybody that's listening right now. And what I did is in that particular episode, I went through all of the questions that you would consider before you start. Like going back to Christian's question he had earlier about like comments, like do you address people? Do you say something? And I think that it all depends on you and your show and your audience. So for me, whenever I've done live streams and I say like, hey, this is a live stream, we're recording. Oh, I see Sarah is here live and her question is, and I read it, it takes away that like, what is she talking about? Who is she talking to if this was a regular podcast? But because I acknowledge, hey, this is a live stream and we are going live in our Facebook community or on YouTube, it acknowledges the fact that this was previously recorded when people hear it on the podcast. But also, I've been a part of live streams and I've done live streams where I don't acknowledge the audience and I just have an interview with my guest and the audience is just there as spectators. And then maybe we answered questions later, in the community. But I think that it's just going to depend on what type of show, what type of format that you want to do for your podcast or your live stream.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also think that, again, it just goes back to it's smart to approach each piece. It's smart to approach it knowing what you're going to be doing with it. Now, sometimes you might get into I know I've done this before, where you get into something and somebody asks that question and you're like, man, that was good.
Yeah.
And you have the fire and the passion because you're live on video. And I know that I am way more animated and passionate when I am doing live videos versus sitting and recording a podcast episode. And so you can take those segments, but again, prefacing it in the podcast, like, hey, this was a really great question I got asked in my community. I know Jasmine Starr does a really good job of this. She has, her, Facebook lives that she does and her live Q&As that she does, they're called like Ask Me Anything. And she also has a podcast. And she will very periodically use one of those questions that she gets asked on a live stream, and she repurposes her answer. She takes that piece of the audio and she puts it into her podcast. But what she does is as a podcast listener, that's what she's doing.
Right.
And so it makes sense. And the whole way you're listening to it is, you're listening to something that was, previously recorded. By the way, before I forget, I know that StreamYard has a video as well on how to record a podcast using StreamYard. So I know I showed the little video about how to export the audio, but there's also a blog post as well. So if you're watching over on YouTube, LinkedIn, or the Facebook page, I'm sharing a link right now so you can check out that video over on YouTube. So the other thing that I wanted you mentioned this. So when you have a guest and you're interviewing a guest, you can obviously, if you're on that basic or professional plan, you can export the audio. But a game changer, this feature is still in beta, and a game changer is you can actually export the audio as separate files. So the reason why you would maybe want to do this is if your guest, their audio weight maybe was lower than yours and you wanted to, in post-production, bump their audio up, or you wanted to clean their audio up a little bit. So I knew that this feature was released, but I didn't realize there's a setting you have to make sure you click in order for it to work. And so really quickly, I will show you all how to make it so that when you have a guest, that when you export that audio, it's actually, because you have to have the setting turned on because it's recording as you're streaming. And if you don't have this turned on, it's only going to record one audio file versus separate audio files. So really quickly, here's a quick demo video on how you can do dual audio. You only really need to worry about this if you are doing interviews, but it's always I think it's good to just have it checked no matter what in case you forget. So there you go. You just go down to the settings and you go to your general settings, and there's the checkbox at the bottom of that list. So or you can go out to the right and you can get to your main settings there as well. But the reason why I think this is a little tricky is you have to be inside the studio.
Do you have to do that every time?
No. Once you change a setting, it will retain that setting. That's also where you change your resolution. So if you're on the professional plan, you're actually still going to be streaming at 720 unless you go into those general settings and check mark that you want to stream out to 1080, which is probably only going to work on YouTube for now. And then same thing with, that's where you change things like when you add your screen share, if you don't want it to automatically add it to the stream, that's where you would set that setting as well. But they just added that setting for recording dual audio files as well. So it's in your main settings, and you only access those from inside the studio dashboard or the studio. So definitely wanted to point that out.
No, that's amazing. I didn't even know that you showed me that, but right before we went live, and I was like, why are you holding out on me? Why did I not know that this was a feature? Like, this is so incredible. So yeah, I think that, again, it's just StreamYard helping you make parts of creating your content that much easier, because you're so right. I've done so many interviews across multiple different podcasting platforms, even Zoom, where it just spits out one single file, and y'all, there's just some things that takes forever to fix in post-production. So having the ability to have two separate audio files it'll just make your podcasting life so much easier. Much easier.
It really does.
Sure.
And somebody had, there are certainly other ways that you can get these audio files, and you can use fancy post-production, but it is a lot more complicated. So I definitely think going back to, StreamYard's mission is they're trying to simplify processes. They're not trying to be everything for everybody. They're not trying to be all the fancy bells and whistles. They're just trying to make sure that everybody has access to creating great content in a simplified way, for sure. So, okay, I want to make sure that people are loving the stuff we're talking about, Crystal, for sure. We've got some great comments here. Pretty excited. Felicia says, this is good. Thanks. I'm just starting to build. I have 2 different Facebook groups. I want to podcast, just trying to figure out where to start. What's your thought on telling? I know you get this question a lot because this is what you help people do. Yes. What is your opinion on giving someone direction on where to start?
Well, Felicia, I would say, if you're looking to start, you have 2 different Facebook groups. I'd be curious to see, is one of them more like the direction that you're leaning to start your podcast? Because maybe you have one that's just for personal reasons, right? You're like, oh, I just started this group a long time ago and I've had it for a long time, but I don't know that it's necessarily tied to a topic that I'd want to talk about. We're just getting so aggressive with these quotations today, but it may not be something you're like, that's just for fun, or that's a hobby. I don't know that I'd want to create a podcast around it. But then maybe your other group is. It's more of a professional, I default to professional because I help so many entrepreneurs. But maybe you're like, this is something that I could see myself creating a podcast about. Then whenever you're just getting started, I always tell people to look at the information that they find themselves talking about all the time. Like, I've helped people start fantasy football podcasts because they were obsessed with fantasy football and they want to share that information with people who are just getting started because they've been doing it for a decade and they've figured out like all the tips and tricks. So that's where they got started. And then other people who have created podcasts that eventually were like, you know what? I love podcasting, but I don't love this topic anymore. So I'm going to switch it up. So whenever someone's starting, I like to tell them it's absolutely progress, not perfection. Because I mean, I can tell you from someone who's rebranded, I've rebranded a podcast and I changed directions about 10 months into my show. So just know that it's not all set in concrete. And once you get started, if you decide, man, I really love this one aspect of the topic that I chose, or maybe you just love interviewing people, or maybe you just love doing solo episodes, like, in order to get started, you have to have a clear idea of what you're talking about, who you're talking to, and how often you want that message to get out there. Those would be the three things. So what you're going to talk about, who you're going to talk to, and how often you're going to publish new episodes. Those would be the three things that I would focus on first, for sure.
Ooh, love it, love it, love it, love it. So here's actually, I love that. And I wanted to bring up this example because it's a girl that I know that I think I heard of Stacy Tuschel from you, Crystal. You were mentioning, Crystal and I are really good. We're like business besties, and we have this, we're always talking about stuff professionally. And I remember there was, you would reference her podcast, the Foot Traffic podcast from Stacy Tuschel. And I believe Stacy actually uses StreamYard. But what's interesting about Stacy's podcast that I quickly picked up on is that, like, almost every single podcast episode is a repurposed live stream that she streams into her group. Now, what I do notice is I believe that she literally essentially streams to her group, and she's just basically checking off two things. So back to Felicia's thing, maybe one of the best ways for you to get started is to be streaming to your group and repurposing that audio into your podcast. That is exactly what Stacy Tuschel does with her Foot Traffic podcast. And as you can see here in the screenshot, this is her live video inside of her community. She's literally got her podcast mic. She is basically doing a live recording of a podcast episode. She's just streaming it to the group. And what I do notice is that she's not afraid to mention people sometimes that are tuning in, but she doesn't overdo that. And so I do think that if you're going to use this type of strategy, be careful about over-engaging. That goes back to Christian's question earlier. You don't want to over-engage too much on your live video because that's going to really make for a challenging experience for your podcast listeners. But back to your point, Crystal, about consistency, is if you're doing this consistency and you're using this method consistently, your group members know to expect it. They get it. They know what you're doing. They know that they're more forgiving when you don't, acknowledge them. And your podcast listeners get it too. Again, I know that Stacy's podcast episodes are essentially, they're not going to be this super high-end audio because she's really not using a high-end strategy. Right there, it does look like she's actually using a pretty fancy microphone, but it always sounded to me like she was just using pretty basic stuff to get started, and which is totally fine. You don't have to use fancy equipment. So I think that could be another way for Felicia to consider getting started as well. There's a couple of questions I wanted to address. And Crystal, I know that you've got a schedule today, so I know you may have to hop off. But I did want to talk about this. I thought this was interesting. So Tails and Fairy says, do I need to always have on headphones when I stream so the sound can be louder? Now, headphones don't make any sound louder, right? But, I know is the importance of this when it comes to pristine audio is, if you're where you have to wear headphones is when you're going to introduce any other audio into that stream. So especially if you're going to have a guest. Now, I want you to chime in on this. I know that StreamYard has the echo cancellation feature now in our audio settings, but what's your recommendation? Do you think that if they're using it as a podcast, and again, that sound quality, do you think that they should make sure they're definitely wearing those headphones?
So, okay, like you said, if you're doing solo, right, it's just you're not going to have a guest like Melanie and I would call this an interview style if we were to turn this into a podcast. Look at with these aggressive quotes today. I don't know. You started it. Now I'm just following along.
I know.
But when I do any kind of streaming and it's just myself, when I record my podcast, when it's just myself, I don't wear headphones. This is a slightly controversial thing in the podcasting world because I've told so many people have told me, you're wrong. You're supposed to wear headphones. I have the big ones. I have the big old headphones that you can wear
to look the part.
I do not like wearing them. I don't. And I will wear them whenever I edit. But really, when it comes to having yourself sound louder, it's all about mic placement. So great example, if I hold my mic way out here, you can't hear me as well. But if I move it, like it's just, if I move it over here, you're not going to hear, like it's just all about mic placement. And depending on what kind of, I guess, aesthetic that you want to have, because I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to have my microphone in the shot. I want to have it like way down here. Well, now my mic is out of the shot and you can still probably hear me okay, but it does sound better whenever I hold it closer to me, which I have. This is the equipment that failed me today, y'all. I normally have my boom arm, which you can't really get like a great shot on it right now, but I do have a boom microphone that I could have above me, and it would, increase the quality of my sound when I'm streaming. But it's going to be more about mic placement than necessarily headphones. But when it does come to headphones, like Mel was talking about, when you're doing an interview, absolutely. Because you don't want the audio bleed from, if Melanie was talking and I had my speakers right next to my microphone, my mic is going to pick up her audio coming from the speaker. And it's a mess. And there's nothing really post-production that you can do to fix that. So you want to make everything a lot better from like the quality is higher before you ever start downloading and exporting things from your stream. You want to set everything up properly beforehand. So I hope, do you agree with that? Does that sound
I 100% agree with it. I personally, so there's also the whole, do you want to hear yourself in your headphones when you record?
No.
I personally like that. I don't like that clogged feeling when I'm recording. So someone did comment that we don't have headphones in, but we both have headphones in actually. They're just so amazing that you can barely see them. So we both actually have
Melanie
the exact
sent
same
me
headphones.
These. She sent me these.
Those were a gift. Those are my gift from my friend. Yeah, these are you can get these on Amazon. So they're made by Me Audio. They're just clear headphones that wrap around. Yeah, they just wrap around your ear and they go behind you. And so again, I like wearing these because they don't sit in front of me and get in my way. I use my hands a lot, but also they don't look like we have headphones in to typical users. But the thing that's important about this is that, let's say you are using StreamYard, you don't have headphones, and you turn on echo cancellation, that whole echo that gets created that Crystal described from the audio coming from the speaker into the microphone it actually works really well. The echo cancellation does work well for that. But what it does is you're making a sacrifice. So when you're doing that, there is going to be what's called ducking. And because what happens is in order for that to not pick up that extra audio, it has to duck the audio recording volume. That sometimes is going to make your voice audio fluctuate. And that is also a poor quality audio experience as well that can be fixed in post-production easier than the echo, but it's a pain in the butt. So why not like put some stinking headphones in and now you don't have to deal with the problem, right?
Yes. 100%.
So I do think that it's important to do that. So this is an interesting question, Crystal, and I kind of want to know what your thought is on this. I personally have never done this. Now Christian hosts a show 3 Saturdays a month, and then one of the Saturdays we have another one with Daniel Patal and Dee Niman, and it's called Live Stream Reviews, and it is essentially a call-in show. So people literally can get the link and they can do basically like live. They can come in onto the show live. What are your thoughts on this for a podcast type of thing? I mean, essentially the way this would work, it could work 2 ways. One, you can just post your link in your description of your video and let anyone watching join. I think that's much safer if you're just streaming to a private Facebook community. But you can also create a gate system, so you can actually make people send a DM to something else outside of the stream, and then somebody can say, okay, they can ask questions and they can kind of like go through a process. Okay, you're probably a legit person, not going to show on and like totally trash our show. Here's the link to join the green room, if you will. But you can do this 2 ways. These people can join and be on screen with you, or they can also join with that audio avatar. So I think our audio avatars are turned on. Hold on. Nope, they were not turned on. So if I change the setting, then it would actually change it, which I could do it right now. Let me do that really fast so everybody knows what I'm talking about. Going to my general settings, audio avatars. Okay, now, so I'm going to turn my mic off, but I'm still here. So essentially, someone could still call into the show, because someone had commented earlier that not every guest, not every person who wants to be on your podcast wants to be on video.
Right.
So this is also another cool thing about StreamYard is that you can actually do audio avatars, which I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. what are your thoughts on doing a call-in show if you're repurposing or if you're doing this dual purpose thing with live streaming and podcasting?
Right. So there's a few ways that I would answer this. And the first one is, like Melanie said, I'm not a fan of just throwing out my link to my StreamYard, like the green room and all that, to just any random person. If it was my community, or if I sent an email to my list and said, hey, you know, the first 5 people to respond to this email, like I would send them the link to get into the show. I'm not a fan of just putting it out there because, like Melanie said, you just don't know. You don't know what you're going to get. So I don't love that to just an open community, but I do like it if you have a trusted, like, kind of gateway system to get people on to your stream. Now, another way that you could do this is there are platforms like SpeakPipe is one of them. It's something that I use for free where people can submit an audio clip that's, I think it's 60 to 90 seconds. And then what you could do is you could play that audio file using, you know, you could actually upload it to StreamYard, or you could play it on your desktop, your laptop, however you're on StreamYard. And you could have that play in the background while you're live. And then another way that you could do it is, so you have SpeakPipe, you could have someone join you. But the other thing that I've done that's really simple is I've done Google Forms. I've done podcast audits where I will audit someone's podcast, and part of the application process is they have to fill out this Google form and they have to submit an audio file if they want me to listen to their show. And what will happen is this MP3 or WAV file gets saved into my Google Drive, and I can share my screen on StreamYard and play the audio file, and it's there. So it's part of the stream. So when I download the audio later, I will have that audio as well. So does that make sense? Like, I want to know if, like, does anybody, yeah. And Christian says, a big fan of SpeakPipe, been a fan for years. Yeah. So I think it's a great place to get started. I've used it a few times and I think it's really cool. I'm like, why don't I use this more often? But it's all, I have a million ideas when it comes to podcasting, but those are a few options to get you started. But I love the audio avatar, what you were talking about, because it would help people feel more comfortable. For those people, this, not everybody loves to be on camera. You know, I don't mind. Melanie doesn't care. Like, we could do this all day if I wasn't afraid I was going to lose my voice. But I think that it's a lot of fun to do it, but not everyone feels as comfortable. So I think having a clear, I guess, expectation of what it's going to be like figuring that out on your own, and then being very clear with your community that, hey, if you join us, you're going to be on live video. Or if you don't want to be on live video, your avatar is going to pop up. Or you can submit your question this way if you want to have, because with SpeakPipe, what I do like about it is it'll let you re-record it like 1,000 times if you want to. If you're like, oh, I said that really dumb. Like, let me do this again. Or, oh, I forgot part of my question. Or I forgot to mention my name. Like, you can just re-record it as many times as possible, and then you could submit it. So okay. I hope that helps. It was Rough Girl, one Rough Girl. That's who asked that question. Yeah.
No, she said, thank you so much. So yeah. So hopefully that was helpful. I mean, there are definitely some different strategies and different ways that you can get into doing that. And again, it goes back to the type of content you're trying to create. You know what I mean? Right. So I do like involving your audience in some way, if whether it be do listener shout outs, or like what we were talking about today, which is doing like a live Q&A inside of your community, but then taking one of those questions and actually using it in your podcast. So that's not really a live call-in show, but it is dipping your toe in the water, and you're also training your audience. Ooh, if I ask questions, I might get featured.
Yes.
And that is definitely creating that engagement. You're training your audience how to engage with you and how to get involved with you for sure. So so Peter George is here. Hello, Peter. He's watching over from Australia. He says, make joining the show something special for your group. You can see how active they are and how they interact with others. Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely think that, you know, what we're talking about today is live streaming and podcasting simultaneously. Essentially, you cannot stream a podcast, but you can use your live videos. You can use the live video platform. You can use your live video content to record the actual podcast recording itself. And so I do think that there's a number of ways to do that. We talked about some best practices with that. We talked about some things to consider. And I think a lot of it comes down to strategy. Don't you think, Crystal, that that's the number one thing you need to be thinking about before you just start jumping into doing this, whether it be launching your first podcast or you already have a podcast and now you're like, oh, Mel and Crystal shared some interesting thoughts. Now I'm going to think about doing this. It goes back to your strategy, whether you're multi-streaming to different platforms on social media with your live videos, or whether you're repurposing some of that live video content into your podcast. Now, the one thing we didn't really cover a lot today, and we may have to even just save this for another day, because I would love to have you back on the show. And if you guys want me to make sure Crystal gets a spot back out here, then I want you to let me know in the comments.
Yes.
But one of the things we didn't talk about is taking... Like if you're going to approach it and say, all right, I'm doing a live video and it's going to be a recording for my podcast, you can also take those clips, take snippets from that live video, the video portion, and use that as like social media posts, like little trailers, little teasers to drive more and more traffic to the podcast. I see a lot of this right now on Instagram. I'm seeing a lot of people repurposing the little video segment of their recording and taking just that like 30-second clip, putting it in an Instagram post, and then, or even like 8 minutes of a 60-minute podcast episode, putting it in Instagram TV and like basically giving us a snippet, a sneak peek of the whole episode, and then basically saying, for the full episode, go over here, and it's basically to my podcast.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of this lately, and I do think that, again, with the whole, you get to download the video and you can download the audio, you can make, this can be done easily. But what is, that's the only thing we really didn't touch on too much, that I was kind of curious what your thoughts were, or if you had any like extra rah-rah to share about that strategy.
Yeah. Well, I actually want to go back to what you were talking about earlier with strategy and share a little behind the scenes of my own podcast, my own business. So when I live stream, I don't typically do it for the purposes of using that as a piece of podcast content. I really don't. I mean, I will have some one-off interviews here and there, but because I've learned this from Mel, like I need to do a live stream every single Tuesday, and that's what works for me, like in my content schedule. But Tuesdays is also when I have a brand new podcast episode. So no matter what, like, because some people will say, I don't know what to talk about on a live stream. I know you deal with that all the time. What I will do is say, no matter what, every Tuesday when I go live, I'm going to mention that day's brand new podcast episode, because I'm a podcasting nerd, but I'm also an even bigger marketing nerd. And I, like, just so you know, creating a piece of podcast content does not guarantee that people will listen to it. You have to talk about it. You have to tell people where to find you. And like, I think about like the logo right here, the Ask StreamYard. Yeah. I added my podcast logo up there, and I will click on it and say, hey, like, here's the podcast. Like, if you don't know where it is, and I'll have a link to it. And I tell people, go listen to the latest episode of the podcast. And every time I will see spike in my Tuesday numbers. And I believe that it has to do with me talking about it on my live streams. But I'll also engage with people and grab questions, like a really good question. I'll write it down. I'll go back and listen to, the live stream and grab pieces of information that I'm like, that would make a fantastic podcast episode. So I don't necessarily always use live streaming for my podcast, but I do sometimes. So I want to throw that out there. Like, just because all the things we're talking about here today, it all goes back to strategy. And I know for me, I can consistently every single week show up and do a bare bones live stream and at least talk about my podcast episode. And so that's really what I use that for. But going back to repurposing content, it's one of my favorite things, because I'm all about working smarter, not harder. I'm a busy mom. I have 3 kids. Like, there's so many things constantly I have a YouTube, I have a podcast, I have Instagram, like all the platforms, just like everybody else. We're all overwhelmed.
Published author.
We're all overwhelmed with all of the things, right? We have so much to do. But at the end of the day, I ask, well, how can I make this easier for me? So what I will do is I will create a theme for the week. And then I'll say, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube video about that. I'm also going to do a deeper dive as a podcast. And then I'm going to use snippets of that, like Melanie was talking about, and put it out on Instagram, put it out on Facebook, to like do it in LinkedIn, like all of the places. So I'm just a huge fan of downloading the video from StreamYard. It's just part of my workflow. When I'm done with a stream and I know it was something super valuable, I will download it, save it to my Google Drive, label it in a way that I know I can come back and use this later for a YouTube video or whatever, however I'm going to use it. But I think that it all just goes back to simplifying your processes and asking, what is the actual strategy here? Why am I doing this? And where is this piece of content going to work? Because a 45-minute IG or a 45-minute stream may not work as well as an IGTV. But what I do is I will slap a little like graphic on the end of a 3-minute video. I'll take a 3-minute clip and say, go watch the rest on YouTube, or go join our Facebook group to get the full experience. So there's many ways that you can do it, but you just have to ask yourself, like, what is the strategy? Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Again, it's funny. It always goes back to the marketing people in us. That's what we're always we're going to answer just about every question that way. You know, it goes back to the strategy, but no, I definitely think that, you know, that I love what you talked about with your workflow. And again, that goes back to it too, is like have a system, create a process so that you can make your life easier. And I know that's one of the reasons we love StreamYard is it does that exporting the audio, the exporting the video, exporting dual audio files when you have guests on. Those are little quirks that are there. They seem like simple features, but they do. If you are going to be using both of these formats together, then that's what I do love. One of the things I love about StreamYard, and like you said earlier, that quality of that video as well, because if you don't get the right quality video, if you're stripping it out, for example, using a tool, then you may have to do more post-production quality editing to get things to where you want to be. So for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Crystal, I know that your time is valuable and I want to make sure I'm respectful of it. So I'm going to go ahead and let you hop off. But Crystal, thank you so much. I know that you helped a lot of people today. I know there are a lot of things that people did not think about before, and hopefully people that are maybe using live video today who have been kind of thinking about launching a podcast, maybe are starting to think about some ways that they can actually not have to work all these extra time. They can actually repurpose some of this content and be using live videos to record those podcast episodes as well. So hopefully you guys were inspired. If you're joining us towards the end, make sure you go back and check the replay, because we covered the difference between live streaming and live audio. We talked a little bit about this live audio kind of evolution that's happening right now. But until there is a live podcasting platform, if you will, we talked about some ways that you can live stream your podcast recordings. We talked about some best practices, a couple of do's and don'ts. We talked a lot about strategy and thinking through some of those things. And then we did get a little techie, and we showed some features inside StreamYard that you might want to be aware of that can help you make that process even easier and better for you. So, and back to what we were saying, the simplest way to get started is to get started. And if you are already live streaming, like this group user right here is saying, I think this could be one of the fastest ways that you could start that podcast, is to repurpose the live video content that you're already creating. I do think that the content strategies are probably very similar. And I think that, again, it just goes back to, like you say, you want everyone to have a podcast. And if you're already doing live video, I mean, the podcasting might be even easier for you. You never know. So, but again, Crystal, thank you so much. Before I let you sign off, where's the best place for people to check you out, learn about podcasting from you? Where should they go?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are watching on YouTube, so you can see the way my name is spelled right there on the screen. You can come find me at Crystal Profit on YouTube. I have tons of video. You can just type in video podcast on my channel and find some more information and content that we've created over there. Also, if you want to check out the Profit Podcast, this is my weekly show where we literally just talk about podcasting like all the time. So I have a few episodes on video podcasting, as well as repurposing content and just some information about how to start, launch, and market your podcast, because that is what I'm obsessed with and that's what I love talking about. But I would love for you to come hang out with me. And I'm so grateful, Mel, to be here. And I'm not kidding. Like, I wish, like, this is like not one of those flattery things. It's one of those that StreamYard has made my life so much easier, because it's taken out so much of the clunkiness of repurposing content. And I'm so grateful. So thank you, Melanie, for introducing me to StreamYard. Like I said, like a year and a half ago, because it really does. It makes things a lot easier. So thank you for having me today.
I'm just excited that you've taken on live video and have seen the results that you're seeing from it, and you use it the way you do to nurture your group. And I think it's great. I think you're great. I'm so excited you were here today. Thanks again for showing up for us, even though you are battling a nasty cold.
Yes.
You did great. You didn't even sneeze or cough once. So I'm glad that you made it through. Thanks again, Crystal. And I'm sure that we'll see you back again.
Yes.
See ya.
Thank you for having me. Bye,
Bet.
y'all.
Bye, Crystal. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. I will tell you guys that I actually am truly a big fan of using live video and podcasts together. I do think that if you're already creating live videos, then you are one step ahead of the game. You're one step ahead of the game. You know, you're creating content, so you already have a thought about the strategy. You have an audience, right? So you have, topics. You're coming up with topics for your live videos. Why not take those exact same topics, that exact same strategy, and look for that same audience in the podcast world? And the reason why I think that it's actually a smart strategy is because not everybody wants to watch a video, but likewise, not everybody wants to listen to a podcast. But at the same time, you might have different objectives going on with how you're using your Facebook groups or your YouTube channel, whatever that might be, versus your podcast. Your podcast can drive traffic to your other, spaces. And then likewise, your videos can drive traffic to that podcast. But the whole point I'm getting at here is that I think so many times people think that they have to start from scratch, right? They've got to create something new. It's all brand new. It's very difficult. But if you're already creating live videos, then you actually have a content strategy. You actually know about your audience. You know what they need and what they want. Take that exact same concept and push it out to a podcast, and vice versa. If you're podcasting, you probably have a pretty good microphone. You probably understand a little bit about tech. You probably understand about marketing. Take that exact same concept, take the all that content strategy that you've already worked hard to do, and then go start creating live videos. And when you use StreamYard, as Crystal mentioned, the whole process of doing both is so much easier, right? It's just so much easier. You can export the audio file. You don't have to strip it out. It's a great quality audio file, which is important when you're podcasting. So I do want to encourage you all to consider this dual strategy when it comes to media, because as I said, sometimes people need to see you, but sometimes they also need to hear you in their ear. And I think when people listen to podcasts, they are in a different mindset. And when people can see you in live video, they can feel really connected to you. And so giving them the best of both of those options might be the best strategy that you need to implement to finish your year strong. So I was really grateful that Crystal came on to talk to me today to help me with this topic. You guys, here's the deal. So next week, we are back for an Ask StreamYard show. That next episode will be September 15th, and it's going to be at 11 a.m. Our show is every week, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Next week, I will be back here talking to you about kind of related to today. We talked a lot about interviewing people and using guests. And today, or next week, we're going to be talking about how to find the perfect guest for your streams. I'll tell you what, there are some really bad experiences out there when people have guests on their shows. So we're going to talk about how to find the right guest, how to prepare your guest, and some best practice so you can have a really good guest experience, both for you, your guest, and for your audience. So I hope that you will tune in next week for that particular show. And again, as always, if you have a question that you would like to get featured and you'd like us to look at it, we're going to look at that question and I'm going to say, is it juicy? Can we go deep with this? Is this going to help other people, right? And so use that hashtag Ask StreamYard, and we just might pick your question, send you an awesome t-shirt, and feature you on an upcoming Ask StreamYard show. So hopefully you all will take us and consider that for sure. And we'll see you guys next week. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we are uploading new content. And of course, we are live all the time with awesome stuff for you to help you with your live streams. Until next time, my friends, I'm going to get out of here. So bye for now. I'll see you guys next week.